Let me ask you a question. What makes improving at anything difficult? Is it the time commitment required to get better? The motivation to persevere after setbacks? Or the undeniable role that talent plays? These are all without doubt challenges that you will encounter when trying to get better, but the biggest challenge of all is identifying what needs to be improved in the first place. In this video, I will explain my theory of where slumps come from, and I'm prepared to go against some of the advice I've seen on YouTube, since I generally believe they've caused me more harm than good, and I will also talk about how players can prevent slumps. I hope this video will change the way some of you approach your improvement journey and educational content in general. Please remember to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a ton. Without further ado, we need to first define what I mean by slump. The term gets thrown around way too loosely in my opinion, since its definition is quite broad. Nowadays, anyone who's underperforming at all calls it a slump, but I disagree. Playing bad occasionally and tilting is not a slump. That's just regular player variance. Having less time to play and therefore not being on top form is also not a slump. That's being distracted. And finally, not being able to adapt to the changes being made to the competitive scene is not a slump. That's just getting washed. A slump is specifically a period when you are attempting to improve by correcting errors, but end up being worse off than before. But how can this happen? Improvement is improvement. Doesn't matter what you choose to get better as long as you get better, correct? In my first video, I talked about how complex games allow you to have more aspects to master, which makes them have clearer paths to get to the top. I really made it seem like this process is evident and therefore simple to just point out your own bad habits, but let me be clear, there is nothing more difficult about gaining skill than identifying what you are doing wrong in the first place. I'm now very wary when I see video titles like, "This one trick will get you to 2000 elo," or "You must follow this rule to improve at chess." I'm not arguing that these videos are not teaching you something that's useful or that the information they provide is incorrect. I am arguing that even if they are, there is no guarantee it will be useful to you as a player. I'm not going to be discussing whether or not reaching a certain elo is as simple as following a few rules, because it's not, but I will discuss why advice from others, even if they are from reputable teachers, should never be implemented without consideration. Since I'm a chess channel now apparently, I will give you some of my personal experience with slumps and where they originated from. I don't know why I'm such an easy target for slumping, but I seem to be doing it far more than my friends. Probably because younger me was very impressionable and took advice from better players way too seriously. I also think it's because I was trying to get better really fast and believed that it was surely just one small mistake that I'm making that's holding me back from my dream elo, which caused me to really blindly follow any get-rich-quick type of advice out there. The first one being, never play f6. This is probably my primo example to demonstrate my view on slumping. I want to first acknowledge Ben Feingold, the grandmaster behind this piece of advice, as an excellent teacher and someone whose lessons have taught me more about chess than anyone else. I also want to say that never play f6 is great advice for newer players who play f6 without thinking and who are not yet experienced enough to know when to break this rule. But I remember when I was around 1200, I was taught very early to avoid at all costs moving the king pawns, and to only move them if you absolutely had to, or saw a positional/tactical advantage that you could explain. Basically, I would only move those pawns with purpose, not blindly. I remember analyzing the games afterwards, and more often than not finding out that I was moving my king pawns at the right time, even when I played f6 or f3. But since 1200 was nowhere near my chess goal, I wanted to up my chess game and watched a few Ben Feingold lessons, and I heard him repeatedly say to never play f6. He even has an entire lesson on why you should never play f6 on YouTube right now. I'm assuming most of the students in his class benefited greatly from this rule, but I was not one of them. I often found myself looking at the game review, missing critical times to play f6 simply because I removed it from all my candidate moves and never even considered playing f6 anymore. I would also try to punish my opponent for playing f6 every single time, since I thought it was surely a mistake, but of course my attack would more often than not fail. There were probably other reasons for why I was stuck 1100 for a while, even if I had reached 1200 fairly comfortably, but following this piece of advice blindly was definitely not helpful. Another example would be me once again following without any consideration the advice given to me by a stranger online, who was arguing c5 was a much better response to e4 than e5. I had played e5 for months, and have never even once thought of it as a problem, but hearing the successes of other players playing the Sicilian made me switch over to probably the most theoretical e4 opening, and you guessed it, I probably lost 100 to 200 points that week. You might think I'm blaming these creators for giving me advice that did not help, but that is not the case. Slumping is a result of your own misinterpretation of your own shortcomings. I found myself often vulnerable to kingside attacks and thought playing f6 was the source of that problem, only to become even weaker due to not finding crucial moments to play f6. I also thought I had a problem in the opening, especially against the Ruy Lopez exchange, so I tried fixing it by avoiding e4, e5 entirely, only to become even weaker to e4 playing an opening way above my skill level at the time. These two examples are rather extreme cases, but I picked them to demonstrate the point I'm making. But slumps more often than not occur from a multitude of smaller occurrences that shape your playstyle in the wrong direction, rather than one big and drastic misinterpretation of a single video. However, not all advice is created equally. There is a reason the most common piece of advice out there is to just do tactics. It is simply a very safe piece of advice. When a new player asks for advice, stronger players would often tell them to learn openings and do puzzles, since without spending the time to analyze their games, they have no idea what they are doing wrong specifically. Unlike Never Play F6, doing puzzles will unconditionally make you a stronger player, and it is a very popular path of improvement since it's also very effective. But you probably know that only doing puzzles will only get you so far. At some point, you will have to try and fix some of your mistakes, and doing so puts you at risk of getting into a slump if you do not identify the problems correctly. If only doing tactics and safely getting better bit by bit was a viable strategy, everyone would be spamming Puzzle Rush to become the next Magnus. It's those riskier paths of improvement that allow us to gain the most skill. I like to think of getting better a lot like the stock market, where instead of money being invested, we instead invest our time and energy. You could invest in something safe. I like to think of memorizing openings, like the treasury bonds of chess improvement. You will definitely not get worse by memorizing an opening, but since it's probably the most time-consuming and diminishing returns improvement strategy, it's definitely not my favorite. The next level would probably be to do tactics, which I will compare to buying the S&P 500. A very safe investment for most players, especially those that do not wish to risk anything. But of course, it will have fluctuating returns. I'm sure there exist players who get worse the more tactics they do, but I will argue that at that point you might have other glaring habits you need to worry about. Just like if the S&P 500 fails, money is probably not going to be your main concern anymore. Finally, the r/Wall Street bets of chess improvement, going on YouTube and randomly select videos to learn from. You have no idea if the player is credible or not, but you still follow it. Who knows, maybe they secretly crack the code, and you will gain 500 ELO from their 10-minute video. Like, I'm sure the next video I watch will have the easy answer to become Grandmaster. I talked about how players can prevent slumps, and well, you will probably not like the answer. If the risk comes from identifying our problems incorrectly due to our innate inability to gauge ourselves, just have someone else who specializes in correcting bad habits do it for you, aka get a coach. Isn't it fascinating that even Magnus has a coach? The best player in the world, who probably smokes any coach he could find, still benefits greatly from having one. Like, this is how difficult it is to estimate our own abilities. This video is not to tell you you cannot improve without a coach. That's a stupid idea since I'm sure most of us are playing without coaches and still getting better. The reason I wanted to make this video is to demonstrate that it's very normal to have slumps. If we are trying to get better, we will risk slumping. That's the reality. Instead of thinking of it as a setback, I like to think of slumping as a necessary step to get better. And working your way out of one will make you even stronger than before. I would much rather have a fluctuating skill level that trends upwards than stagnating at a single plateau for years and barely getting any better. If you are finding yourself stuck at a single milestone, maybe try looking at your games and find a few things you wish to improve and focus on them for the next few games you play. Even if you end up identifying them incorrectly and lose elo in the process, just know it's not a big deal and a necessary step in the right direction. A lot of you have asked me what my elo is in chess, and I will talk about it in more detail in an upcoming series, but I just hit 1800 rapid very recently. I pretty much only play rapid since I don't believe playing any other time control that's shorter than 10 minutes allows me to actually analyze the positions and get better at all. And for those of you waiting for the history of chess video, just know it's being worked on, but don't expect it to come out anytime soon because I plan on spending quite a bit of time on it. And as always, thank you for watching.